our next session, why the next generation of enterprise software will likely be building on crypto and Web3, with Dr. Markus Krug, Head of Innovation Center Network at SAP. Markus.
Okay, thanks everybody for joining the session. I hope you're enjoying the conference. So my name is Markus, and I'm working for a team that builds the next generation of enterprise software for SAP. And one of the topics that frequently comes up is, how is crypto and Web3 relevant for enterprise software? So this is one of the questions that I want to talk about today and give you a bit of a sense of where we landed on this question. But let me start with a story, the story of James Howell. James Howell was one of the first people to learn about Bitcoin in 2008. He downloaded free software to start the mining process without knowing what it was all about. It was just a random experiment for him. He did it for a couple of months, mined about 7,500 Bitcoin, spent about 10 pounds on the energy usage, but having the laptop running 24/7 was a bit annoying, and so based on his partner's request, he stopped the computer, stored away the Bitcoin that he'd mined in some disk, and basically forgot about it. And then in 2013, when that Bitcoin was about worth $1 million, but he didn't know about it, he accidentally threw away the disk with that Bitcoin. When it occurred to him, obviously he was very sorry, because today that Bitcoin would have been worth more than $100 million, despite the fact that we're in a bit of a downturn and a dip in the crypto market. And so I think this story illustrates a couple of points that are really important. The first one is, oftentimes, if you're looking at new innovations, they're not really recognizable as the next big thing. We're seeing that often in our line of work. You look at something, it looks like a play application, it looks like an experiment, and then a couple of years later, you found out, it's a big topic. And I'm also mentioning this specifically on this topic because when we're looking at crypto and Web3, many of the questions we have are still of that sort. There's a lot of skepticism, hasn't necessarily reached mass adoption in many areas. And so the question is, how is this relevant? We have that same type of question all the time. Is this something we should embrace? Is it too early? Should we get in? And so that's one of the topics. But then the other thing I really wanted to highlight with this type of story, just look at the appreciation of value. Starting with an investment of 10 pounds, ending up with $100 million worth of investment. There's another story here as well that I don't necessarily want to go into, because it's also a story about a failed user experience. So the same thing that makes crypto very interesting is also the fact that allowed James to lose a lot of money really quickly, and so that's something that we need to figure out. But since those early days, a lot has happened. We have more than 10,000 cryptocurrencies in the world, and while not all of them are equally important, it shows the amount of interest that's happening in this world. The total crypto market cap is close to $1 billion despite the downturn. It used to be $3 trillion before. We have more than 16,000 Bitcoin nodes that are securing the Bitcoin network. So obviously there's something going on. Also, Andreessen Horowitz just raised another crypto fund of $4.5 billion that is going to be invested to a large degree into crypto and Web3 consumer-facing companies. So over the last few years, we've seen a lot of investment into infrastructure, into blockchain businesses. But Andreessen Horowitz believes that we're going to see major progress in terms of mass adoption potentially, especially through crypto Web3 consumer-facing companies that they're currently investing in. And so I think there's quite an interesting type of momentum. So how does it all relate to businesses? We see three major areas that I want to talk about today and give you a bit of a sense of how we're thinking about this space. One is about payment and finance. We're anticipating faster, more flexible, more innovative payment and finance services. We're anticipating crypto and Web3 to be relevant to the next generation of business networks that allow us to do things that we really cannot do today. And the last piece is about the emerging Metaverse economy, where already today many of our customers are thinking about how can they leverage the new opportunities, the new business opportunities, and embrace the new customer experience. And there's certainly a lot of interest in that space as well. So let's talk about payment and finance. Deloitte, end of last year, did a survey among 2,000 senior retail executives, and this is what they found. 64% see already today a significant customer interest in crypto. So this is mostly about being able to pay with crypto in e-commerce. But 85% anticipate crypto to be basically ubiquitous within the next 5 years. And another 85% also expect suppliers to accept crypto. And I think this is just a bit of a summary. We're seeing a lot of momentum with our customers who think about how can we accept crypto in an e-commerce payment, how can we leverage stable coins and for B2B payments in order to avoid cryptocurrency fluctuations and hedge against some of the volatility in the market and things like that. So that's increasingly becoming a topic. Customers typically expect on the benefit side additional market share, being able to appeal to new customers, differentiating their brand, but then also creating a new customer experience that's maybe more simplified, more convenient, and speaks to more people. But on the business side, they're also experiencing efficiencies or expecting efficiencies from being able to manage cryptocurrencies directly. And one of the most important points that I'm trying to hone in on is that there is a lot of innovation potential in those technologies. If you look at it, just some of the capabilities, and I know this is kind of boring to walk through it, so I don't want to spend too much time on it, but we have basically a neutral, decentralized infrastructure for computation. We have digital trust. We can innovate without intermediaries in many cases. We can tokenize assets. We can use smart contracts in order to write code that governs how those assets are used. We have a tamper-proof ledger. We have crypto payments, fractionalization, crowdfunding. Those are only just some of the elements that make up the innovation potential in this space. And in one of my previous roles, I actually tried to build a fintech venture for SAP in the US, and I can tell you, innovating in that space with a lot of intermediaries is really, really difficult. Just think about innovation in an end-to-end fashion in the e-commerce space. You have the merchants, the e-commerce software providers, the payment technology providers, the gateways, the networks, the clearing houses. You have merchant banks and customer banks, and it's really difficult to align all of those people. And I have a computer science background, and I definitely appreciate the ability to go around all of those intermediaries and just put up whatever I want to do into code. And I think this is one of the really interesting promises that the space has. But then also, there's a lot of innovation that's already been invested in the space. So this is just the DeFi ecosystem that we have today that provides everything in a decentralized fashion, from payments to custodial service. So James, if he was using one of those services, wouldn't have to lose his money anymore. There are marketplaces, there's insurance, credit, and lending. So a lot of building blocks for building decentralized applications and leveraging advanced features are already available. And so especially in the finance space, we believe this is one of the more tangible places where we've already started innovating how we can offer payment, accounting, financing to our customers across our entire solution portfolio, including finance, procurement, customer experience, payroll. We actually have a booth downstairs where we talk about how we're envisioning those things and what we've already built in this space to enable it to our customers. And our vision is to essentially combine business processes and decentralized finance to provide an embedded finance experience to our customers. And some of you may know that, but finance applications are really one of the cornerstones for SAP's business, so that is something we think about a lot. But let's also talk about business networks. So business networks are really what enables companies to collaborate across the entire value chain, and they're increasingly important for the future. We're living in a world that's impacted by geopolitical conflict, climate change, pandemics, material scarcity, supply chain disruption, and all of those things require an increasing amount of collaboration between the businesses collaborating along the entire supply chain. And it's more and more about keeping the lights on than about optimizing profits. So this is really important. Now, SAP runs one of the largest B2B business networks with more than 7 million companies across more than 190 countries. And this is a great starting point, but the world has more than 210 million companies. And the question is, how do we get those other 203 million companies somehow connected so they can do business with each other and solve some of the most important challenges that we have in this world? And one of the core ingredients for this is actually identity. And you can see here an evolution of how identity has been developing over time. So you all are familiar with the centralized paradigm where essentially you connect to different providers via individual credentials, and essentially the providers sit on top of the data. But as you can imagine, it's really difficult to get your data from one provider to another so that there can be seamless collaboration based on the data. The next one is federated, where essentially we've tried to make things a little bit more convenient by adding central federated identity providers that now give you one identity that you can use with multiple providers. But the situation is basically the same. You still have the data residing with the individual providers. And so self-sovereign identity is a new way of thinking about identity that essentially gives the control over the identity and the data into the hands of the user. So you can imagine, as you can see on the right-hand side, a user that has a wallet that stores the identity, just like you're storing your personal identity in your wallet. And it also allows you to store verifiable credentials that you can present to different providers in order to allow them to use that same data in order for essentially doing business and exchanging that data. You might ask, what's the point? One of the areas in which we're actually using that in an innovation project we're running is in the area of decarbonization. Probably you will all agree that decarbonization is one of the most important priorities that we have in this world. And in order to reduce the carbon emissions, we need to understand them. But in order to understand them, we need to track carbon emission primary data across the entire supply chain. So that data, unfortunately, resides in many, many different systems today that are all basically managed in a central paradigm. And it's really difficult for the different systems to interoperate and exchange that data. And that interoperability is a massive challenge. Many of our customers have hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers. And if you think about the supply chain, just of getting a cup of coffee to a venue like this, on average, you have 19 suppliers involved. Now imagine trying to understand the carbon footprint of that coffee end to end as it comes to this venue here. So that's a massive challenge. And our solution is actually an open, interoperable, decentralized network implementing those paradigms. So we have portable digital identities. We're exchanging carbon emissions as verifiable credentials. We're actually also using other cryptographic means, such as zero-knowledge proofs, to verify accounting standards have been used in calculations in order to establish an end-to-end auditability and verifiability trail of the data, and building an open standards and open networks. And we're currently talking to vendors, so this is not an SAP proprietary solution we're envisioning on. No business can solve this problem alone. This is supposed to be a global network that anybody across the company, across all geographies, industries, and company sizes can join. But you don't always just want to exchange data. So actually, if you think about the entire supply chain, many, many difficult collaboration challenges need to be solved, and many complex processes need to be exchanged. And so typically, if you're looking at a buyer-seller relationship, there are different documents that those companies need to exchange in order to business, such as RFQs, purchase orders, and invoices. And the problem is, especially if those reside in different systems, it's really difficult to get them in sync. And they have different semantics on both sides. There's a lot of friction, a lot of inefficiencies that is involved in here. And one of the projects we're working on is a decentralized standard called Baseline, which allows for the synchronization of state and content of those documents secured through public knowledge proofs, zero-knowledge proof on the public network in a decentralized way. And so this is another great tool for really helping businesses collaborate better in a really interoperable way across vendors. And then one of the key interesting things about this is that you can also take the assets that are being generated in this fashion and channel them into the DeFi ecosystem in order to bring DeFi financial applications into those business processes, which is really interesting. Now, last one, let me talk quickly about Metaverse. So Metaverse is a bit of a fuzzy concept, and actually I'm going to skip this definition of the Metaverse by Matthew Ball. But some of the key elements that we see is it spans the physical and virtual worlds, and I think there's an emphasis on physical and virtual, as well as on the plural. So we're not just going to have one metaverse, we're going to have multiple. We have a fully fledged economy in a metaverse that is emerging. And so obviously from an SAP perspective, it's really important to think about how can we support our customers in that economy. It offers unprecedented interoperability, which is really important and also speaks to some of the points that I already mentioned. And it's operated in a decentralized way. And we see 4 important pillars that we're currently working on in the metaverse to support our customers. I already mentioned the first one, so being able to seamlessly manage asset and finance flows, being able to make payments and things like that in the metaverse is table stakes, of course, right? That's the way business is done in the metaverse. But then the next one is about being able to do commerce in the metaverse. Many of our customers, as mentioned before, are thinking about, what does it mean that we'll have the metaverse, that we have things such as NFTs? What does it mean for the buying experience? What does it mean for consumer engagement? How can we leverage those tools to provide new customer experiences and really innovate in this space? Then the third one is hybrid business steering. Maybe that's a little less obvious. I mean, probably all of you have some notion of what the metaverse is. I mean, everyone's probably tried on virtual reality goggles at some point, and you can envision yourself doing some of the things, attending a virtual store. But what does it mean to run a business in the metaverse? And one of the important concepts for us is this notion of a digital twin. So digital twins are essentially digital replicas and virtual copies of existing assets that could be anything from a building to a piece of equipment, literally anything that companies are working with today. And increasingly, digital twins essentially mirror the real world, and they're used for simulation, they're used for optimization, they're used for machine learning, and there's a tight relationship between what's happening in the physical world and what's happening in the virtual world, and there's a bidirectional channel between those. Now, as you imagine, I mentioned that many of our customers work among each other together across company borders. And so if you have a digital twin of a manufacturing company, then the digital twin of a supplier isn't necessarily compatible. So they live in different virtual worlds. And one of the things that we're thinking about is how can we bridge those virtual worlds and provide that level of interoperability so that in the future, if you're running a manufacturing line and you're using your digital twin to simulate the outcomes, you could actually ask suppliers to give you virtual twins of their equipment so you can swap it into your current production line, run the simulation, optimize your output, and decide which one is most interesting for you. And then the last point we're really interested in is augmented employee experience. As also you all know, we're living in an increasingly virtual world. Collaboration among employees is increasingly virtual. We actually did a survey in our team, and most of our team members want to continue working virtually. And since human experience management is one of the cornerstones of SAP's business as well, we're really interested in what is this virtual experience going to be like, and how can we use the metaverse in order to facilitate that. And so obviously virtual experiences, virtual collaboration are an important point of that, but also things such as portable career credentials. Right now, being able to do background checks, being able to verify certain claims that people are making about their career and their CVs, that's increasingly important, and we're working on tools that make those career credentials portable so you can acquire them in one company and present them in another and essentially fully automatically check all that's happening. So with that said, I want to wrap it up. So we definitely believe there are very tangible crypto and Web3 applications that it makes sense to work on right now in the payment business network and Metaverse economy, even though that might be a little early on the Metaverse side. But there's a lot to be done in order to build the foundation to work on crypto, work on tokenizations, NFTs, and all those types of things. And that's how we believe it's probably not going to go away, and we're heavily investing into the space in order to make it real for our customers. With that said, I'd like to thank you for your attention. Thanks for coming, and I'm happy to welcome any questions that you might have in the remaining time.